Hello, and welcome to my cellar. It's going to be a long one this time, and that's probably good because there won't be one next time. Next week. I'll explain in a minute. First off, once again, the revisionists are hot at it. Now they want to scrap an entire book because it doesn't meet today's standards of scholarship, I guess. I'm not sure. The book I'm talking about is Oriental Adventures, written by Gary in, I think it was 85, well after I left. Now, there's a gentleman called Daniel Kwan who does an Asians Represents Tabletop podcast, and he says, if you buy this, you show wizards that they're okay with Asian people being represented by blatant stereotypes. And it shows customers that these legacy products are to be consumed despite their use of dated and racist stereotypes. And he said that runs contrary to their stated purpose lately. So my question is, okay, so you're not going to sell any books, no matter when they were published or what value they have, because they have stuff that's objectionable now. It was a bestseller at the time. None of its writers were Asian. Let's see, it's been heavily criticized by Asian fans and designers for its liberal use of stereotypes of various Asian cultures and by mixing them together to form one homogenized fictional culture meant to represent an entire continent's worth of bullshit. Apparently you never read Gary's introduction to it or forward or whatever he called it and said, hey, here it is, a whole new element in gaming. Okay, I've combined these things. I've taken these tropes, what we call now tropes or memes or whatever, and I've offered you a whole new setting to go play. Let's break out of the medieval Western European stereotype. And in it, he used the terms Occidental and Oriental as they were proper at that time. All right, and he tried to give him something different. Now, I have a good idea why Gary went the direction that he did, and that was the lesson we all learned by another game that attempted to portray Asiatic gaming milieu or setting. Game came out in '79 by a little tiny company that then went bankrupt, went to another company for about a year, and then it got picked up by Fugu, Fantasy Games Unlimited. And that was called Bushido. It was written by two men who knew a lot about the culture. It was very deep and rich in Japanese culture and the code of behavior in Bushido, etc., etc. And it bombed. It bombed. Gary tried again 4 years later to open up this new realm of gaming to be inclusive to these myths, these mythologies, these cultures, hoping, I'm sure, to attract more players of Asian descent. Because, yeah, we started out as a white guy hobby because it was white guys that played minis, and it's where it all grew out of. It took years and years and years to break that mold. Bushido bombed. To say it got mixed reviews would be kind. Of course, it was also full of typos. horribly littered with typos, and it was therefore pretty hard to understand. But it bombed. People were not ready for that immersion at that point. So 4 years later, Gary said, well, okay, let me give it a shot. And he was wildly successful. But now it's being condemned for its stereotypes. While I agree that, stereotypes are not always, are seldom a good thing to label people with. I don't understand why people can't see it for what it was. A very early attempt at inclusion and broadening of the mythology base, etc. And now only can see for what it is now. Apparently, if we apply that logic, then we're going to have to go back and throw a lot of books out because they have discredited ideas or they use words that aren't favored today. This is what history is for. History is to study these things and not burn the books that offend us, but to write new books and therefore educate us, share with us what it is you think we're missing. But burning the old books isn't a solution. That's a knee-jerk reaction and never very good. And they tried. And Bushido bombed. Here's a follow-up from last week. Hi, Tim. Fortunately, my dad is still around. I actually had a discussion with him about the new revisions WotC is doing. He said it's going to be boring as hell having all the characters be the same. That it was the unbalanced guidelines of the past was what made the game intriguing and a challenge. Next thing he says, we need to roll up some characters to play. Yeah, I mean, a perfect, as equal as possible, golly, nobody gets an edge would be something the akin of a role-playing Monopoly. Oh, and by the way, during the course of this evening, I'm going to be sharing some things with you because a good friend of mine has a new Kickstarter coming out, and he sent me some teasers. Let's see, what am I going to tease with first? Well, it's a Kickstarter coming out. It's a post-apocalyptic role-playing game fanzine. And I hope we all just can start abbreviating this as PA or P-A, so that we don't have to say apocalyptic every time. Anyway, it's from Mud Puppy Games. It's designed and produced by Jim Wampler. It's edited by some guy named Tim. And it's got contributing writers. It's got Levi Combs from Planet X. And oh my God, it's got Skeeter Green. That ought to be good. Scott Robinson. And it says, not the B&B guy. Okay. Mike Stewart. And some guy named Wampler. And a whole bunch of artists in it. And anyway, this is going to launch on the 7th of July. So I'm going to show you some teasers and stuff as we go. Give Jim maximum exposure. Okay. Dear DM Tim. No, I'm not DM Tim. I'm just Tim. He names 3 people here. And if you're reading the comments, you know who he's talking about. But I'm trying to stick to my I don't name names on the comment. Anyway, they raised intriguing points about combat rounds. Following on from theirs, please note these might be closed questions, but please elaborate it if you can. Okay, and once again, I'm going to make my standard announcement, and that is, this is the way I do things. I don't necessarily preach that it's the right way. I don't necessarily preach that some way you're doing it is the wrong way. this is the way I like to do it. I like to think that I have stayed true to the early foundations. But, that's my conceit. All right. Is it possible for two characters to attack at the same time and kill each other within the mechanics of the game? OSDND. Old school DD. Well, yes, it would be. There are circumstances where that could happen. For instance, in my 10 segment rounds, if both you and the opponent are both, on round 6 and you each hit and you each die, well, okay. It could happen. Now, in my games, because I just run con games and they're all about fun and hacking and slashing and what have you, if you and the bad guy each roll a 6, I let you have your 6 first, because maybe you can kill him before he kills you. But that's just something I do at cons, just kind of to keep the action going and to have, I know it sounds strange, fewer player deaths. But that is something I do. But certainly I would say that it is possible. Why wouldn't it be? I'm sure, I'm very sure that if you could somehow look down on past events, you'd see riflemen that shot each other. You'd see pikemen that stabbed each other, spearmen, it happens. Everything is not cut and dried like that. Hopefully no sugar bombs tonight. Gotta learn to lay off the indica on Fridays. Okay. Let's see. Next question. If two foes square off, each having different reach, i.e. spear versus sword, is it possible for the sword to beat out the spear in initiative purely by rolling better and therefore get past the spear? Or does this action have to be stated by the sword player before rolling? Okay. Here's how I would do it. I would give anybody that's wielding a spear, I'd give them a negative going toward a lower number on the initiative roll. Maybe 20 or 30%, 2 or 3 points on the initiative roll. Roll a 6, you are a 3. Roll a 3, you are a 0. Roll a 1, you're still a 0. Okay, but that's how I would handle it. And therefore, if they roll a 9, minus 3 is 6, and you with your sword roll a 4 or 5, yeah, you get first whack. I don't care about cinematic realism. We're not filming an Errol Flynn movie, or Conan, or anybody more modern. It's not The Princess Bride. Okay, we're looking at a way to break down a very fluid and chaotic thing, a fight, into segments simply to decide what happened where. So let's not get bogged down in ultra super de duper realism, and let's go with the flow a little bit. Let's play it as it was intended to be played, and find a way to do it. It's one of the reasons why it's guidelines and not rules. Related question: if sword rolls higher than the spear, does it mean the spear's attack still counts, or has the spear lost reach advantage and perhaps must use the pole or butt of the spear rather than the pointy bit? No, that's silly. For one thing, if you're fighting underground, unless you're in a big open room or whatever, spinning that sword around to use the butt and all that, it's liable to be a little restricted. You're liable to be clonking some of your party members in the head. Probably not a good idea. So, the spear gets his attack when he gets it. That's the whole thing. Think of it as a stroboscopic effect. Stroboscopic effect. Flash, 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 flash. What happens in each flash? When the sequence is done, you look around, who's standing, who's not, start over again. Question 3, really pushing it here, he says. Oh yeah, this one is. If a bow wielder is ill-advisedly bringing a bow to a close-quarters sword fight, do they automatically win advantage, or must they roll for it? If you're in a generalized melee, everybody rolls. Everybody rolls. Again, whether or not you want to give advantages, meaning negatives in my mechanic, the way I work it, to give somebody an advantage or a disadvantage, that's fine. What I do with an archer who says, okay, I'm going to shoot an arrow, and I know that they hadn't been carrying it, semi-knocked on their string or even clutched in their hand next to the bow, where it would be available for a, quick thingy, a Legolas move. Then I say, okay, you rolled a 3, you go on 7, or you go on 6, or whatever. If they got a real super high dex, they might just, get a penalty of a couple. Now, if a bow wielder shoots at very close range, does this reduce their damage? No. If anything, it would make sure you got the higher end of the damage because you've got more impact. As the arrow travels, unless you're shooting in an arc and coming down and gathering momentum and punch through the armor through gravity, there's more oomph in the first 20 yards than there are in the 90th and 100 yards. Okay, a lot more impact. So I wouldn't make it less. I might look at making it a little more. But there again, where are you fighting? This is up to the DM. Can't use a longbow in a melee, in a corridor, all crammed together. Just doesn't work. There's not enough room to wield it. Short bow, yes. Compound bow, okay. That's up to you and your game. But certainly, there would not be a diminishment of impact. Arrow, you hear talk of spent arrows just as you hear talk of spent bullets. They get there, and arrows, remember, unless you're shooting in a parabola, arrows eventually fall to earth in somewhat of a flat trajectory. Also, is there a greater than usual chance of parrying a bow shot at close quarters? No. Much less. If you need to understand this, go look online at any archer's channel on YouTube or whatever, and look at the speed of the arrow. The arrow comes off the bow fastest, closest. Less reaction time, because the arrow does slow. Now, degree of slow from 20 feet to 100 feet, it's going to be incremental. But you would have the least chance. Look at it as trying to hit a baseball. Try to compare the close shot to the fastball as opposed to the farther shot being a slider or something of that nature, a curveball that you have more time to decide whether or not you're going to hit. You have more of a reaction time. It's only tenths of seconds, but I believe the example holds up. Okay, now here's a gentleman that wants me to believe that he actually plays a 10th level Gelatinous Cube. So I'm going to read this just because I find it amusing and absurd at the same time. Firstly, I'll have you know that my 10th level Gelatinous Cube does not truck with humanoid PCs except to introduce them to the 3 E's: envelop, eat, excrete. Well, that's a simple code to live by, I guess, if you're a gelatinous cube. We are, in fact, a hardy band of gelatinous cubes of various levels, classes, and races. You read right. There are elf gelatinous cubes. Nothing else, though, just elves. Because Tolkien said Melkor did things to some of them, but not exactly what he did, so there, it's canon. Gelatinous cubes make fantastic delving companions if you're not a tasty humanoid. But just so you know, if you chance upon a 20-foot gelatinous cube, that's actually 2 gelatinous cubes making out. Also, wizard gelatinous cubes suck. Literally, it's the only spell they bother learning. I guess suck's a spell if you're a gelatinous cube. I guess it could be. It's a verb of soft enough. One day soon, I hope to furnish you with a delightful painting of my 10th level gelatinous cubes party in an act of daring do, otherwise known as the 3 E's. Envelop, eat, and excrete. For now, I leave it to the theater of your mind. There you go, the theater of the mind. I think that's best left there. Don't you? I do. Speaking of theater of the mind, here's the first teaser. It's a new fanzine called Scientific Barbarian. One of these days I'll do this backwards. It's really amazing. I can't do this backwards, but I have, since the social distancing thing, learned how to shave with a straight razor without cutting my throat. Let's see. There's a bunker briefing, a designer's notebook, the biology of the crater mutant, the Sable Rangers, mutant melodies, cognitive critical hits, a mini adventure, and regular features, including comics. My God, how can it go wrong? So on July 7th, this is coming out. I'll show you some more later. Let's see, done with that page? Done with that page? Okay. All right, what else we got here? Using your turn-based initiative, how do multiple attacks work in the same round? Are both attacks simultaneous? There's one now and another one later. I guess I'm also asking, does 2 attacks actions get separate initiatives for a character with 2 attacks? Digesting, processing. No, they don't get 2 attacks. For one thing, I deal very seldom with characters that get more than 1 attack around. The only thing that immediately springs to mind is somebody was hasted. So, what I might decide in sitting down to the game is that this person has 2 attacks. I might arbitrarily decide, okay, they're going to be 4 different. Roll a 1, you go on 1 and 5. Roll a 5, you go on 5 and 9. So your second attack is at 9. Again, we'll go back to the stroboscope. Click, 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 click. You can't be swinging both weapons at the same. You're not the damn drizzle guy. You're not swinging both weapons at the same time like some mad conductor. There has to be, simply for the breakdown of the mechanics, there has to be stop, do this, do that. If everybody all rolled their dice all at the same time, who hit what, when, where, it becomes an arguing point. No, so I would not roll 2 separate initiatives. What if you rolled 2 9s? No, I wouldn't do that. However, if you did roll a 9, then you'd, let's see, you'd go on the 9th one of that round, you go on the 4th one of the next round and the 8th one of the next round. So your 2 in a round would kick back in eventually. But that's another reason not to use people that hit twice in a row. Or, swing twice in a row. Okay, now here's one I did actually do some thought on today. Unlike the usual run-of-the-mill curmudgeon where I look at the stuff at 10 o'clock at night and wing it at midnight. My RPG comfort zone is apparently locked in to a stew made of AD&D, Palladium 1E, and Arduin. Add a pinch of Talislanta and Warhammer Fantasy RPG for flavor. Some books from this era are still available at a reasonable price. Many are not. Most players I know want at least a physical player's book in hand for reference. Now to the question part, okay? What are your thoughts on the OSR, Old School Renaissance, and its clones? They are readily available and affordable old school rules. I'm leaning towards OSRIC due to its very nature as a cleaned up AD&D and modern organization of all 3 original volumes in one book. Second thoughts go to Basic Fantasy RPG. Okay. OSRIC came around when I was not in the industry, so I've had to go back and figure out, what happened, when, and where. And there's kind of 2 forms of OSRIC. Now, they all work on the OGL, the Outside Gaming License, wherein if you use a term that's owned, you got to acknowledge it, and you got to put a thing in the book saying, okay, yeah, you can play this with such and such a game by so-and-so, and, blah, 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 blah. Something we never bothered with at Eldridge. We just wrote around it. I like the old school. I'm firmly in favor of it. In fact, I've written one or two. I know I wrote a foreword for the later printing of Swords and Wizardry, which is kind of an OD&D original, small books clone. I like some of the other ones. The true OSRIC is basically a cleaned up AD&D clone. And I have no problem with clones. Clones came about because TSR and later Wizards were unwilling to let people use their IP willy-nilly without being compensated. I mean that as no criticism. That's simply a fact. Anybody that has IP should be able to expect to be compensated for its use. Wizards put out 3 different lists of don't use these monsters, none of which can contain the boule. So it's why I keep using it. Yeah, it was a cleaned up version. It was somebody with editorial skills and organizational skills, which are not always the same, went in and cleaned it up. And so I'm all for it. I have made no bones about the fact that I'm stuck there right in between when ODD became AD&D and that, and don't ever intend to move. And all these other additions. Second, I have no objections to second. It was a nice idea to clean up first. The rest of them you can keep. I didn't like what they did to the game. So I'm all for the old school Renaissance. I'm all for playing the old way. I'm all for guidelines, not rules. And I believe that is one of the underlying rock solid ribs of the old school Renaissance, is that kind of a, hey, we'll lighten up and let's all have fun kind of vibe. So I'm in favor. The ecology of the crater mutant. Now, I'm not sure if this is in black and white or not. Don't go by this because my printer was going bug shit a little while ago when I printed these. But this is some of the This is an actual excerpt out of the book. Just pretty neat stuff. I heard this. Here we go. I heard the 6th edition was going to be a paint by D20 coloring book with special metallic and pastel crayons where the players get together and tell each other why the random colors make a story. Any truth to that, or someone just pulling my peg leg? Yeah, I'd be extra alert to your stump. I think somebody might be tugging on it. Though it makes you wonder, doesn't it? They're gonna basically boil all the juices out of this game until they have a perfectly even game where everybody's the same. Boring. Let's see. Now here's an odd question. more than odd. Can you please describe a happy, fun memory in real life of you doing some recreational activity, observing nature, especially, but not necessarily exploring or traveling to the great outdoors, camping, backpacking, hiking, biking, boating, fishing, or whatever, maybe just bird watching or gardening in your own backyard? Well, I've done all those things. Or maybe getting high off cannabis or some entheogens and feeling mesmerized by a rock collection, or whatever that is. Whatever you can share with you witnessed of the natural world that you can describe that you enjoyed, that really this is a long one, that really inspired your theater of the mind for fantasy role-playing game or fantasy fiction setting creative would be appreciated. If so, and how, and why? All right. Okay. So, needless to say, watching TV and the internet doesn't really count. And on a personal note, the heyday of D&D fun for me and my buddies around 1985, 86, when we were 12 and 13, going on similar crazy, bantering, mischievous, juvenile, delinquent adventures portrayed in the 86 classic Stand By Me, exploring the woods in our neighborhood, semi-rural suburbs in Oregon. Maybe besides, my question is more about any real physical evidence at any time of your life, observing the natural world that don't involve being totally housebound indoors in your fear of COVID-19 or some terminal illness or anything. Well, what do I like to do outdoors? Until a couple of years ago, I loved going fishing. Best fishing trip, catching a 6-foot blacktip shark. And I was getting it to the boat before it jumped completely out of the water, wished its tail, and severed the line that looked like it was something that hooked into your speakers. It was so thick. On a sunrise on the ocean, when you're in the middle of the Pacific and there's no land and anywhere for 30 miles around you, watching the sun creep up, watching the sun set. First time I saw the aurora borealis in the back of a station wagon, the back of a station wagon, lying down, looking out the tailgate, driving back from Minneapolis in his old beat-to-shit station wagon that I think Brian owned it. And first time I ever saw that. The most awe-inspiring thing in dealing with the night sky was the first time I went topside on the aircraft carrier I was on at like midnight, and we were 50, 60, 70 miles offshore, and meaning there was no intruding light, and looking up and seeing more stars than you ever imagined existing from this horizon to that horizon in a complete dome over your head. A very awe-inspiring, which is a term that gets misused. But if that didn't inspire awe in you and just how huge the universe is and how insignificant we are a part of it, I don't know what will. Flying through the little Grand Canyon of the Pacific in Hawaii with my wife on a trip with headphones, listening to the Ride of the Valkyries from Apocalypse Now as we zoomed into the canyon. I know there was a helicopter there, but the Grand Canyon of the Pacific, if you've never seen it, I believe it's on Kauai, is absolutely amazing. Nothing like helicoptering down the canyon at about 100 meters off the deck, looking out and seeing goats looking right back at you on the sides of the mountains. You know, I remember the first time there's a river in West Virginia, not far from where I live, called the Gauley, Gauley. And once every year in the fall, they open the gates, the floodgates, and they drain the dam down so it can fill for its winter level. And it's some of the wildest whitewater rafting in the world, literally. And the first time I surrendered myself to the power of that river and realized, okay, I'm here for the ride, don't kill me, that was pretty awe-inspiring. I was stationed out in Puget Sound for a while, saw some beautiful country out there, the forests and the ocean, the shore. I guess that's all. What we're going to do, we've decided as a family, my 2 grown children, and my grands and my great-grands have no voice. They're not old enough to vote yet. My wife and I, a year ago, rented a huge house in Gulf Shore, Alabama, where they're having a spike. And we'll be out a ton of money if we have to cancel. I mean, a ton of money, because this is an enormous house right on the beach. So we had a family powwow. We're all going anyway, even if it means we'll spend a week together as a family, isolated in a big house that sits literally on the beach. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to do that, and we'll see how that goes. And when we go, I'm a kite flyer. I love flying kites. I have probably 10 or 12. Most of them very simple, but I'm going to take a wad of them, let all the kids fly kites. And if they lose 1 or 2, I buy well-flying kites on sale at the end of the year every year. Oops, blood sugar. Okay. Need some more sugar. All right, here we go. I think the question about deferring initiative is about not taking an immediate action, but instead preparing a more complex action later in the round. No, I think I didn't read it in that way. Like I said, I have a way to defer initiative based on what you're doing if it wasn't something you were prepared to do already there. Like if you didn't already have the rock in the sling, it's going to take you a couple of segments to reach in, fit it, and get, it's not instant unless you're hasted. No, he thinks miscommunication is seeing the action unfold in a series of influences like the strobe effect you once described, or seeing the melee progress simultaneously once everyone has declared their actions. No, that's the other fudge I let them do. They don't have to declare what they're doing until their number comes up. So that enables them to attack somebody else. See, another thing that don't always do, unless the monster's initiated, is square off. It's a big swirling melee. There's 3 of the same things, all same stats. You're fighting. You hit something. Which one? Oh, you hit the one that hadn't been hit before. Or, hey, you got the one that was tottering. You downed him. Okay. I only mention my Slavs and Malaysians because they like to playfully throw racial slurs at each other. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here thinking, so this is what it's like to be outside of America. A lot of people outside of the first world have bigger problems than worrying about how woke they look to Twitter. You bet. And yeah, I kind of thought you were, making a point through a little exaggeration. I remember back in the service, we used to call each other terrible names. Until my good friend died a few years back, who used to live up the street. We were friends for, 30 years. He was black and I'm not, obviously, and we called each other all sorts of racist names, just teasing around, shooting pool, messing around. He used to tell me I was the whitest N-word he ever knew and stuff like that. And now we don't dare let anybody else overhear us because, somebody will report us to the woke police. Why is it the people who lived through the Satanic Panic and the Reagan-Thatcher years and the Bush areas are saying now there is too much censorship? The censorship people are complaining about now are just people responding. No one is actually stopping anything. Everyone just has a voice now. The irony is complaints about censorship are calls for censorship. Anyone complaining about SJWs should look into what happened to people in the media who opposed the Iraq War. They should look into what happened to the guy who invented the computer. Guy breaks German codes. The country castrates him for having sex with men. How do generations of people living through cannabis prohibition say that now we have censorship? I don't know about that one. I agree. It's very suspicious. Reading the Wizards articles, it says they are adding more to orcs and drow. The most famous D&D character is a drow who is a good person. That was the 80s. Nothing new is happening. It's just now that we can hear everyone complaining. Yeah, you might have a point there. In my opinion, many of the people that find themselves caught up in these movements are either busybodies. I need something to do. I need something to do. Warriors on behalf of other people's causes. Or people that just like to raise a stink. And then there's a small proportion that might be actually sincere. Mutant Maladies by Skeeter Green. Well, that's bound to be strange as all get out. The Gene Looms of Janet Vacca, a 3rd to 4th level adventure for post-apocalyptic stuff. And seeing as how it's from Jim, I'll bet it fits right into Mutant Crawl Classics. I'll bet you. July 7th, that starts. I really think you ought to look at it. Personally, I think that the post-apocalyptic stuff is some of the most fun out there now. I don't get to play on the other side of the screen that often. So when I do, I'm careful about what I commit the time to. And Jim sucked me into one of these Mutant Crawl Classic games a couple of years ago and hooked me. I mean, come on. Just how much emotion can you actually invest in a character? And where I'm going here is to get so wound up you go into a depression. In a character that becomes a spider with 83 eyes on the top of its back and head that shoots weird beams. I mean, come on. Just how invested in that 83-eyed spider did you become? Now, I didn't go in as an 83-eyed spider, but that's what happened. And okay, we're still playing. I think when you get just a little too uptight about your medieval Western European fantasy, go play a post-apocalyptic. Go play with mutants and ray guns and eyeball beams and all kinds of weird little microorganisms that could get into your body and mess it all up. Yeah, I really think you should, just to shake the cobwebs off every once in a while, because just about anything is possible in a post-apocalyptic game. That machine you just started taking could be a little bitty teeny weeny thermonuclear weapon in which the whole campaign is going to be vaporized. But hey, if you're the DM and you put that in there and allowed it to happen, it serves you right. Of course, if you haven't done a lot of it yet, they don't know what got vaporized, so you just touch up the ones you did, the ones you explored, and use the rest. Let's see. Been painting. Well, actually, what I've been doing is assembling some 400 plastic miniatures ogres. I love the board game. I like the minis game, though I'd like to see the combat changed in the minis game. Make it more minis and less D6 CRT game. But I still don't know. I even bought on Steam the other day because it was on half price, $12.99. I bought it just because for $12.99 it's great cartoons. You zoom in close and man, shit, stuff happens all over that board. So anyway, I'm putting these things together. And I mean, there's a ton of them. And when I say a ton, there's roughly 400 vehicles. Now, I'm not even counting the infantry squads, though I am counting the vehicles that haul them. And the average vehicle has probably 3 or 4 parts. And they're teeny weeny little things. So I've been going crazy with that. And I've almost got them all completed. And of course, I had to go get, well, I didn't have to go get, I had some tackle boxes not being used yet, so I put in all the dividers. And then I'm going to start painting them up. Now I'm not going to paint on the bogey wheels and everything. It's going to be what I would call sand table painted. The grosser colors, the larger, more prevalent colors, not all the fine detail, because they're going to be handled. And I'm also fooling around with paints. And I went out and bought one that I'm not very happy with, the brand. Can't say I'm very thrilled with them. I got a hold of a good friend who's a world-renowned painter, and she gave me some tips. So I'm looking at other stuff. Went out to buy some brushes. Gods and little fishes. No wonder minis guys don't get them all painted. The paint and the brushes, which are wear or use items, are hideously expensive. I went to a hobby, a craft chain that I generally don't try to patronize because of who owns them. But anyway, it's the only ball game in town unless I want to go downtown to the university to one of the really expensive art stores. Anyway, I went and looked for a handful of brushes because a lot of the brushes that I kept are so dried out. And they're ridiculously expensive. There's all synthetics. And they've changed the numbering system. What they're calling a 10-aught is what we would have called a 2 or a 3-aught. It's like, oh my God, the brush. Anyway, I guess I got some paints being sent to me by a friend. We'll see. And I'll get to paint them all. And then we'll finally get to use them. But I decided to see if I still could do it after my new eyes. And I think I can. And it's been a test of my fine motor control to put all those pieces together. But I am. So I'll give you a full report on that. And that brings us to the final note. Let's see, how long has this been going? Ooh, quite a while. There won't be one next week because I make these on Friday night. Tonight's the 3rd. Next week is the 10th. On July 10th, next week, my wife Cheryl and I will have been married 50 years. And I'm pretty sure I'd never make another podcast again ever if I made one next week, because either I'd be dead or at the very least I'd be trying to make one without a tongue, because she'd probably rip it out. So you may ask, what are you going to do to celebrate? Well, the big thing down to Gulf Shores, that's really kind of our bring all the family together and have a good time. However, on that night, we're going to recreate our wedding night. Now, we were married in the afternoon or evening, and we had a very brief reception, family, friends. It was a small wedding. Then Cheryl and I climbed in a car, and we faced a 90-mile drive north to Rockton, Illinois, to a lodge that we were going to stay a few days, and then we were going somewhere else and stay a few days. We had this neat little thing. So anyway, we're tootling along and realized that all we've had to eat all day is a cake, and we're kind of hungry. So out of desperation, I think it was in Dixon, Illinois, we stopped at a Sandy's. Now, for those of you not from the Midwest and or old enough to remember Sandy's, Sandy's was a line of burger joints. Sandy was a guy in a kilt and a tam and, the pipes and the whole 9 yards. And the burgers weren't all that good, but their fish sandwiches were. So we had fish sandwiches for our wedding night supper. And so we're going out. Can't find a Sandy's, so we're going to go to Mickey D's, because God knows we've eaten a lot of fish sandwiches from there together. We're going to get fish sandwiches, and then we're going to go have ice cream, and then we're going to come home, because we're still in social distancing, trying to keep each other safe and healthy. City of Cincinnati finally made masks mandatory. Won't start for a week, duh. And I don't know what all the little cities around us, like us, are going to do. I wish they'd do the same thing. If you're going to go out in public, wear a mask. But I won't preach any more about that. If you haven't gotten the message yet, you're not going to. So, tomorrow's the 4th of July, our nation's birthday. Fireworks been going off all night around me anyway. Tomorrow night will just be worse. And the night after that will be kind of like tonight. Because God knows where I live in Cincinnati, we're big on our illegal backyard fireworks. We're real big on it. So, when you see this, those of you who see it tomorrow, I hope you get to go watch great fireworks somewhere. Enjoy the pyrotechnics. There's the theater of the mind for you. When you have somebody like Rossie's Famous Fireworks, who are located here in Cincinnati, do the fireworks. Like every year they do one down on the river. It's about a 20-some minute display, all synchronized to rock and roll music. Probably not that good tomorrow. A lot of places around here aren't having the big gatherings. But they're still shooting the fireworks off. Encouraging people to go park in parking lots and side streets and whatever and enjoy the show. So, until 2 weeks from now, which will be the 17th, I'll be making it. Do Dada Govi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's a curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard brain. PSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.